All right, you guys ready to do this thing? Welcome to this episode of the Prestige-ish Media Podcast. I'm your host, Craig Lake, and with me, he was the second best student in West Virginia, so he didn't spend a lot of time in toilets. It's Bird from West Virginia. Ed, how's it going?
Oh, fantastic. Always being here. Let's get it going.
And our other co-host is the greatest consumer of Granny's peach tea. It's Tom Chan. How's it going?
I am very peachy.
So we're switching it up. We just saw it, coincidentally, Unreal is going on the same time as Dark Side of the Ring. So I pitched it to the fellas. Why don't we just cover both? If you're here for our normal TV show coverage, we'll be back Sunday with House of the Dragon. But we're talking about wrestling today. Any big wrestling stories you guys want to cover from this week? The main thing I saw today was the XM radio deal. I don't know that XM really matters anymore, but the big thing I saw is they're going to simulcast Raw, SmackDown, and the PLEs on the radio. So for long road trips, I think that's pretty cool. What'd you think about that, Bird? Any other big stories this week for you?
I've had Sirius for years. We got it at such a low price now. Imagine that with me. For a while, it was so high price and you can just get deals, but I think it's good. It's going to be probably more mainstream, but it's going to be all their stuff all together in one platform. I think it's a fairly big deal.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Did you hear about that, Tom? Anything else on your radar from the week?
Nothing else. Just one, how much WWE can you talk for? 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, 30 days?
I think this channel already existed, and then you're going to start throwing in shows, the podcasts that they already do in the simulcast, and then whatever's already on there within reason. I'm sure it'll change slightly, even though they say it won't change. I'm sure everything does, but yeah.
Whitney laughed. She said, "What are they going to do? Play entrance music?" So I said, "Well,
that'll be awesome."
I'm sure.
It's like Christmas, a music station during the
they're gonna make you pay for the W Club Music app to buy that. It's an extra $4.99. I did see they got the AAA toys, I think, at Comic-Con this week. I think I saw that out of the corner of my eye. I didn't go into the post yet, but whatever money TKO can milk out of the world, they're gonna figure it out. So let's start. I think Unreal is pretty cut and dry. So let's start with Unreal just because I think it's easier, and then we can get to the main event, some might say. So Unreal Season 3, Episode 1 was titled The Why. I talked a little bit with Tom about it this morning, Bird, but I watched all of Season 1. Season 2 just didn't hook me as much. I think I wish they just would go a wrestler or a family of wrestlers per episode, because they go everywhere. And some of the stuff I just don't want to watch. And so Season 1, it was the Uso stuff. Season 2, I think it was a mix of Bianca. I liked the beginning of the R-Truth stuff, but it got a little too emotional for me. And then also you end up kind of seeing all the important clips online anyway, just everybody's clip farming. So by the time you get to it, I've already seen half of what's relevant. I assume you watched full both the first 2 seasons, but where are you at with Unreal?
Well done production, obviously. Some of the stuff we know, which is probably not their goal to touch people that watch all the time, but a very real take, as real can be when they're showing some of that stuff. But this episode, before we really get into the episode, they bounced a little bit. So they started out with, we're going to get a lot of Cena, which is going to be great. So they started out with him and Logan Paul, who I think Logan Paul is fantastic. And that was just a little bit of a piece. Maybe they wanted to get a bite of that. And then they went and jumped pretty much away from that and straight to Breaker.
And if we want to rate this episode, I'd probably have it as a 7-9. What would you rate it, Bird?
I wrote down, maybe I'm a little low here. I put 6, even though I enjoyed it.
I think
what it was.
I think that's fair. Where would you come in, Tom? And any thoughts on this episode for you?
Yeah, I'll give it a 7, only because it's the first episode. So get a little bit of hype around it, but
that's fair. We average about a 6.95 somewhere in there. So go ahead.
But I didn't really watch much of Season 2. I think I watched most of Season 1. I have to check, see if I missed anything. But the format that they do, I don't really mind it. But yeah, Bert said it really jumps around. But the whole Logan Paul scene with John Cena, I thought was pretty awesome.
I think maybe my thing with the first season is it might have felt a little more linear in time. So even if they were jumping around to characters, I feel like I really knew where I was in the year. And I think starting with season 2, the more they jumped around, I just felt it just, I don't know, it didn't flow well for me. And this season's kind of starting out that way, but I thought it was fine enough. So we start with the Cena farewell tour. I think him and just the Logan stuff was probably the highlight of the episode. We also get a little bit of talk about he was in the middle of his heel turn, going to his face turn, how much kind of this meant to him preparing for every last stop. What did you think of the Cena portion, Tom?
I thought it was good. Kind of gave a little insight between him and Triple H on what they planned together. But I mentioned earlier, the whole segment with him and Logan Paul was really well done. How they showed what they were practicing in the ring, and then they showed what they practiced actually happening during the match. So you can see what kind of preparation Logan Paul really does, despite what other people say.
Bird, what did you think of the Cena portion early?
Cena, definitely the spokesman for the company. I think he's a fairly genuine dude as far as that level of a celebrity goes. Seems like he cares. They showed him later on with scenes with the kids and things of that nature. Again, they just bounced. I think season 1, it was open the curtain. We could see Gorilla, a lot of that stuff we really haven't seen a lot of in depth as it was there. Now it's just more normal that we get to see some of that stuff, but I'm seeing some of the behind the scenes stuff. But Cena, I would say, came off obviously very well as he normally does. I don't think he's going to sign his name to something where he's going to be negatively looked at or something that would bother him personally.
Yeah, I don't think he's as image conscious as, say, The Rock is. It's just more, he just always presents himself so well, but it's not, he's always trying to craft what his narrative looks. It just seems to be very genuine with him. And we kind of saw the rubber meet the road with his ruin wrestling idea, and maybe it was working a little too well. But one thing I did want to mention about both these shows, and I'm watching a little different now that we're covering it for the podcast. And I find myself wondering in Dark Side specifically, because I kind of know in WWE, I feel this is 70% what's going on, but they're still hiding a lot. And I think in Dark Side of the Ring, it's more certain people are maybe more dishonest than others. But you're just guessing. Last time where this is the real Scott Steiner. Is it? I don't know. It's the closest we've seen to that, but it did seem very authentic, but we don't know. You know what I mean? And so I was going to ask you guys, this is unreal. And even though we're covering documentaries, I think it's probably 70 to 90% real, but there's always probably going to be some stuff that they're still holding back. What do you think about that concept, Bert, or how do you feel about that?
I'd say that's fairly spot on. I don't think they want to give everything away, not that they should. Some team, I'm sure they do just for the camera. I'm sure this is all overly produced, well produced, and they got a good flow to it. I do think it's an easy watch. As far as the sitting down, it's just pretty laid back, and you kind of learn a few things. Just kind of you get in the mix of some of these stories, and it catches you. So I think they're doing a good job of that element of it.
And to be fair, Bird will probably watch anything wrestling related on any streaming service, especially if he doesn't have to pay too much for it, or whatever hard drive you slip him with wrestling or what have you on it. Tom, how real is Unreal or Dark Side, do you think?
Unreal, I think, would you say 70%?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's still a WWE produced show. You see the Lee Fittings names and the credits and all that. So I'm sure they bring a cut to Triple H of what they want to show. You can tell there's still a mix of they're trying to do kayfabe and non-kayfabe with their storytelling during the show and all that. So the Unreal is still definitely 70% real.
Yeah, and I think too, to me, it feels the more seasons we get into it, the more produced it feels almost. I thought it was last season. It seemed Punk was maybe still a little uncomfortable with it. And this season, he's front and center with the whole family. So we shift to Bron Breaker. I generally Bron Breaker. I think we all do. We really didn't get a lot of him. The gist was he likes to fish, grew up in a family of wrestlers, and Roman allowed him to spear him in France, something Bono was hoping Roman would do to him. What did you make of the Bron Breaker segment, Bird?
Kelly touched that he's just a country kid to us, just a young guy coming up in a business. Kelly showed the football stuff. Number one, a lot of people may not know much on his family. Of course, guys our age definitely do. But I thought that was a nice touch to throw them in the mix. I think he can be a star. I'm just talking off what they didn't show, just depending how they present him. Now he's a little undersized in my opinion for what the Vince attitude would be on a champ, but he's definitely intense enough. He's built a Greek god. I think seems genuine enough as a wrestler to want it.
Did
Bird McMahon wanting his champs to be 6'5", 300 pounds.
6'5", blue eyes, finance, and juice to the gills.
That's right.
Did Gianna watch this one at all with you, Bird?
She's watched the other seasons, but since we watched this one so quick, she hasn't seen it yet, but she will. So she didn't watch any at all.
I'm just curious what some of her age thinks of Post Malone or that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But we get the Post Malone cameo. Tom, what do you think of the Bron Breaker section?
I thought it was good. Definitely, I think they're just introducing the general audience to the newer people. So you won't get the one whole episode of a Bron Breaker's life or anything like that. So just a quick, brief intro for these people, but I liked it. I didn't know he was that good in football, so some of the football stuff, damn.
Yeah, and I guess I knew he played in college, but I didn't know that he had his tryout or that he even got it. How much of that's real or not. I'm sure if he would have stayed on practice squads for a couple years, who knows? But he kind of seems like he just got wrestling after wrapping up that first camp. We get a lot of CM Punk and AJ Lee. The beginning of sad, if you don't know, spoiler alert, but Larry is going to pass away at some point. So I don't really think that we're probably going to find ourselves in the middle of that. I'd rather see most of these wrestlers die than poor Larry, for crying out loud. But with that said, what did you think of the AJ Lee comeback, Tom? I think at the time it was fun. I think the beginning of it was fun, but I would say two things. The more we saw of her, I think the less rewarding it was for everyone. So if the plan was for her to come back when she did and wrap up at Mania, which it seems like that's at least the first part of this run, if that was just her swan song and farewell, I think that makes sense. But if they make a point to say she made sure she signed for the same as CM Punk, who the hell does she think she is? But with that said, what was your thoughts on not only the AJ segment and all this, but just her comeback as well as we watched this in real time?
I didn't know that she was that big advocate for same pay back then when she was in her first run, but here we are with that.
Yeah, I don't know. And that's where I do think it's fair.
She was Selena trying to start up unions or whatever.
Yeah, it is what it is. But yeah, go ahead. Any other takes out of it?
That was a fair assessment with not having her around that much because I don't know, it seemed her whole signing and her whole attitude, I guess, during the whole thing was manufactured. But then again, it's a show too. So her making a big deal of not getting a contract signed until 30 minutes from before getting out there or something like that. So I don't know. But yeah, definitely the less of her, especially with her promos and all that, is probably better.
Bird, your take on the segments and the AJ Lee return in general?
First, I'll jump in just on AJ. I thought that the build bringing her in, everybody was anticipating it. Seemed like the younger generation in the crowd really was pumped to finally either see her or knew something about her. And Chicago, everything lined up. She got a heck of a pop. Now, was I ever a big AJ Lee fan? I didn't dislike her. Same way, even I'll say for Punk. I'm not a big Punk guy. I don't dislike him. I just always think of him as the old salty kind of guy, even though a lot of those guys are the same age. But now, when I flip over the hill there, as a family guy, it was nice to see them. I thought some of that was genuine. That's kind of the first, I don't want to say real Punk, even though he says his promos are always real and he says what's on his mind. That's more character Punk to me. The dog was in bad shape, and I'm a dog guy, but just pretty cool just seeing him backstage and that put him in the family pictures. I thought the family element was well done. But AJ's comeback in short doses it worked, but somebody that I probably wouldn't want long term doesn't have a lot of legs.
Yeah, and I think she's somebody, Punk kind of described her as, I don't know what he called her, the bridge from the Divas to the newer generation. She was in there. The Bellas were certainly in there and maybe a little bit more prominent, although AJ was a little more respected as a wrestler. But upon review, how much better of a wrestler is she than Nikki Bella? Question mark. Definitely than Brie, but I don't know. I think Trish has aged better in a wrestling ring, translating as an athlete in the ring from somebody who couldn't have hung with those guys back then, but can now a little bit. Whereas I think even Lita but she's older, and AJ, I think it shows in the ring a little bit that they didn't come from the same generation these current wrestlers came from, and they're not quite the athletes. I know Trish was a world-class fitness model, so maybe that's why she was able to pick up some of the athletics a little bit quicker than maybe some of these other girls that were just wrestling and have been off for so long. But I don't know. That's just my take on it. Anything else from you guys I do agree with you, Bird, that the build was done very well. I think Becky did a lot of that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to mention Becky, how well, whether anybody likes Becky or not, I think she's a pro. Very good in the ring, I believe. I think she's a pretty good heel. Sometimes we get a lot of her during some of those runs, but Becky, and I thought she carried AJ well, and it seemed AJ was real about being nervous, and I'm sure she was worried about wearing those same outfits, and she was skinny as all get still and all that. So that was probably tied into that mental health thing, and she probably went through some things, but you don't know what's true and what's not.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm probably a little bit more maybe reserved with her criticism in other ways, and that I don't it's tough to speculate on someone's mental health, but some of her stuff seems a little over the top to me, or a little dramatic, but she's also had those struggles, so God bless her, whatever works for her. This is a Netflix show, so we don't get this is the big ESPN debut. We don't get any mention of that. That was the first WrestlePalooza. Maybe we'll get more on that later, because this isn't exactly linear, but we see that Cena is going to take the beating from Brock. And I think to his own detriment during this run, he's just so willing to take an ass whooping more than any other top star ever has, to my opinion. And he's willing to talk through the logic on it. I think he's mostly sound. I think sometimes it's almost the opposite of Hogan, but you almost have to protect him from giving up too much. I think in the last 10 years, he just gave way too many wins away, in my opinion. But still interesting to see the background of what his thought process was and how it was scheduled to be Drew, but because of the reaction with Brock, that they shifted to A. Thoughts here from your side, Bird?
I think that's pretty spot on how you took it. Now we're comparing guys of that level. We're talking Hogan, Rock. I think Cena's probably 10 times easier to work with. Didn't seem like he wanted to be the top dog, I'm sure. It was overly competitive, but he would take the loss, and it seemed like he cared about his opponent enough to make the storyline or whatever work on all ends, even though he had crazy runs, and Cena's an all-timer in my opinion. But I think he's a little more headstrong than, say, a Rock that probably would butt heads a lot with creative, in my opinion, on some, especially later on. And Hogan, we know how his creative was. So I think Cena's just a different animal for the length that he had, and then just to kind of respect a lot of these younger guys and give them probably too much, he said.
I think just his length at the top, without, you said Hogan to get pissed with creative and leave, or the steroid scandal, or Vince thought he was done, whatever issues they were. Even the NWO run had, a 4-year run? You know what I mean? It was a time, whereas Cena was willing to carry that ball for at least 10 plus years, and then he only faded out just to give some other people, it seemed to really give Roman a legitimate shot. There's actually something that even leaked this weekend, and I think it was with O'Shea or somebody else, about him supposed to win 17 from Roman at SummerSlam one year, and they just came up right to before the show and said, hey, we're going to have Roman win. And there's no way a Hogan would come back for a 6-month run to win his 17th. And then Vince is just, no, that's not going to work for me, brother. Tom, your thoughts on the Brock and Cena stuff here?
I think Cena is all about giving back. So he knows that the company will work with him. So he's willing to take all those losses for the better of the company. So he's definitely, seeing for the future rather than for himself. I think that fits his mold perfectly. But yeah, the whole Brock match, that was the second time this kind of match happened, right?
Yeah, it happened at one SummerSlam years ago with Brock. Yeah. But I think nobody expected. I didn't expect it this time at WrestlePalooza. I thought maybe he'd lose, but I didn't think he'd just get schlonged.
He got COVID.
But I think we've seen, he talks about that transfer of energy, and we've seen how with Oba and Brock, I think it's worked pretty well. We're not to the section of the comeback tour yet with Gunther, certainly. But when we get there, I don't know if that's worked as well. But I think with Brock, every time he's passed the ball to Brock, Brock has passed it to somebody else. I feel that's accurate and has worked, but it doesn't always work.
And I think maybe it has to do maybe with his Hollywood life too.
Yeah, but didn't he lose the solo Sequoia on one of his times on the way out? I think in Saudi, that did not work as well, I feel. But anytime he's passed it to somebody legit, they've benefited from it. I think the highlights of Cena's return. I'm not a big AJ Styles guy. I'm not anti AJ Styles, and I'm the same with Punk too. I'm okay with both of them, but I'm not the hugest fan. But I think the AJ Styles and the Dominic Mysterio stuff were two of the highlights of Cena's comeback, and we get one of them this episode. How much, I think we were generally live messaging each other on that match, but I thought it ended up pretty incredible. Although definitely you could argue a spot fest. It did remind me a lot. The later matches we got with The Undertaker, there's a certain style of match of The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Undertaker, Triple H, of trading finishers and all these things. And I will argue, Bird, our wrestling historian, that one of the first big matches, and what this specific match actually reminds me a lot of, is the Macho Man Warrior match at WrestleMania 7. And that was a retirement match for Savage, not only temporarily, but I think Vince kept trying to drive him out of there probably at that time. But secondarily speaking, just the trading of finishers. And I hadn't seen anything else now I saw it on tape, so I didn't see it live. I probably saw it a year or two after it happened. But that was crazy to me as a kid. What do you make of that comparison, Bird? What else would you compare it to? How did you feel watching it?
First of all, not a bad Warrior match. If you're comparing Warrior match, I'll give that match some credit. Probably part of that was Savage, I'm sure.
Of course.
There was even a very good Warrior Hogan match that doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion. Generally, he's not going to get the in-ring. Now, what I liked what Cena and AJ did, they were doing a lot of people's finishers that weren't even theirs, giving tribute to guys they've worked with. Was it overkill? Maybe, but we probably knew going in what we were getting there. It was the moment. Both of them were stars. They seemed like they each other from what we see. So I'm sure they enjoyed working with each other. And I imagine, not being a wrestler, that Cena is very easy to work with. He seems easy just in general for the company. You can trust him. I think he would be safe, seems safe. And he's not going to do anything flippy floppy or anything that he can't do. And I think he's going to make his opponent look good.
I still think pulling the tombstone out of your ass, I'd want to have a few practice runs of that one. I'm sure hopefully AJ's long soccer mom hair covered up any potential blemishes there, and hopefully he was far enough away from the mat. But it looked pretty snug to me. It didn't look I wouldn't have felt comfortable lowering someone that far. Tom, your thoughts on the AJ match, and what do you remember of it?
I thought it was fun. AJ's well-traveled. So it's definitely, and I think we kind of knew that he was on his way out too for that when that match happened. So it was fun for me to see all that doing all those finishes. I wasn't catching it at the time. Was the crowd really calling out finishers?
I don't remember that as much, but I do believe that they would have called out the RKO.
Yeah, maybe that.
I believe specifically that one, but I don't know that they were calling out tons of them.
Yeah.
They were definitely cheering for them as they realized what was coming, I feel. But I would believe the RKO one for sure. So I think this was Crown Jewel in Perth, which is the first Crown Jewel that wasn't in Saudi. So it was kind of weird because as you're hearing them chant, they got a British accent, and I'm like, are we in Saudi? And oh yeah, this is the Aussie Crown Jewel. So Seth injures himself versus Cody. He wants to make sure he gets that Saudi belt, so he goes ahead and makes sure he wins before he tells him how he is injury wise. But Seth Rollins getting injured in just enough time to make it back for WrestleMania is kind of Groundhog Day at this point. Upon review, to me, it doesn't seem that big of a deal because I feel he was back in time for Mania, but it sucks anytime somebody gets injured. That's what we close with. Any thoughts on the Seth injury, Tom?
A little bit, maybe dramatic with him talking about it and comparing to WrestleMania, but I thought it was pretty neat just to see him hear him make the call during the match. And then you see Cody just saying, like, we good? We good? Okay, I'll throw you on your shoulder then.
Yeah, kind of him with Kevin Owens' neck through the ladder at the end. Bert, your thoughts? I guess the biggest part of this was how integral he was to the Vision storyline, and that kind of goes sideways here. And I think we'll get more of that as this season goes on. But just kind of spoiler alert, but all of them get injured. Is he frozen?
I don't know. I always think it's funny when they show the shots right to the writer's room and they're all just sitting there not saying anything to each other. So what are they doing in there? They're just going,
Are you on your cell now, Bird?
Yeah, our power kicked off. Luckily, West Virginia style here, so I don't know how well it's going on my phone, but I feel I got a connection. Sorry, guys.
Well, it's probably fitting because we're on our way to West Virginia territory. We are going to cover Dark Side of the Ring, Season 7, Episode 4, Necro Butcher versus Samoa Joe. I will say, as soon as we started this episode, we spent way too long with Jeff Jarrett. Like, 2 episodes should have been the most Jeff Jarrett anyone had to see. It was more good than bad, but God bless it. Tom, initial thoughts and rating on Necro Butcher versus Samoa Joe. Were you and Bird both watching from your respective trash cans?
I'd give it a 7.5.
Okay.
I thought it was pretty good. I didn't really know much about this match at all. Didn't know anything about Necro. I don't think I maybe seen the name here or there, but had no idea about that guy. But I thought it was pretty good storytelling throughout.
Bird, initial thoughts and rating on this episode.
So rating, and I'm not just stealing the same rating. I also wrote down on my notes 7.5 as well. Now, this is a wild ride. Now, comparison to Unreal, I think we got a lot of cardiness going on. You mentioned on Dark Side. I think on Unreal, a lot of people know, the wrestlers know a little bit about what they're going to show. I don't think they're blindsided. And Dark Side, you just have so many different elements, just doing little bit pieces of interviews, which comes across great. But I don't know if they know what the full picture is going to be when it's done with production.
Yeah, and I get one of the ones I was thinking about is I was wondering how forthcoming Samoa Joe was really being. He's the type of guy it came across as he was shooting straight, but I could see him protecting some things. And I don't think we really have an understanding of what level of cooperation there was between them in that match. It's set out there. There was basically none, but there's a lot of trust that's got to go there to not have at least. It seemed there was an idea of how Necro Butcher wanted that match to go and that they lived that out. So I have a hard time believing that they just feel that out without at least, it could have been 1 minute, but just an idea of beat the shit out of me for 30 minutes and go home. Something like that.
Especially if you've never worked with each other before.
Yeah, but so that's just, I'm not sure, but yeah, I'll go right in there with you guys. I'll do a 7.4 just to fit all up for everyone. Oh, and now we got the artwork back too.
Now we're back in action. I feel more normal now.
There we go. So some of the characters we get in here, Eddie Kingston, which I think some of us are more familiar with. What do you know about Dave Prazak, Bird? What's he been involved in?
Yeah, so he's buddies with all these guys. Prazak, so he used to do Shimmer Girls promotion, the Midwest promotion. So he's a big female wrestler backer.
Aren't we all?
There you go. Thumbs up. He seems that crowd of indie guys really him. I haven't heard a lot of negative things, and pretty smart guy. He's been involved with a lot of different promotions. The guy's feet wet in TNA and some other indies and things like that nature. So I think he's a good piece for that. And I thought he came across well in this part.
Is he kind of a poor man's Conrad? Indian
yeah,
Conrad?
Probably not as annoying to some. I know Conrad has his people that don't care for him, and I'm not a Conrad hater one way or another. I think he's probably more of just a general dude, kind of us. I don't think he big times himself. Not that he really is.
Now, who was making the calls, Joey Styles? Was that him or Kingston, or who was that on commentary? There was just oh my God, or holy shit.
That one guy.
I was thinking it had to have been Prezak, but I didn't know who that was. I don't think they played any of the Punk commentary. I don't know.
I was going to ask that. Did you hear Punk during the commentary at all? You barely heard Kingston either.
Yeah, it seemed, I didn't know if Kingston was maybe higher pitch back then. I don't know if what he sounded 20 years ago. He's a few smokes and a few pounds since then. But anyway, so Necro Butcher himself, his real name is Dylan Summers. I did not remember him from The Wrestler. I saw that in theaters, but obviously didn't know him at the time. What part of West Virginia is he from, Bird? And I'm sure you were pretty familiar with him, but when did you become familiar with him?
I've known him just because of the indie scene and being a West Virginia guy. Not that really West Virginia praises him one way or another, but just that little fact. I forget the exact town or where he's from exactly, but it's not like he's got a flag out on the West Virginia guy, but he's known as that. One thing I will say, he's not a total idiot, even though he has idiot style matches. He's somewhat intelligent. I know looking at him, it doesn't seem that, but all of his cronies and everybody that's with him have said that for years, that he's a fairly smart dude. And I think he knows his limitations and what his character is.
I was going to joke that for being the smartest student in West Virginia, it gets a little questionable in here. I think one of my favorite parts was Samoa Joe just talking about him basically being blind and just kind of going for whatever blob was in front of him. That part seemed to be maybe pretty more accurate than it should be. Tom, I assume you didn't know anything about Necro, right?
No, apparently he's from Pine Grove, West Virginia, wherever that is. But yeah, like I said earlier, I had no clue about him. I maybe seen the name once or twice on some dirt sheet, but had no idea what kind of match he did. The whole deathmatch thing, maybe cool for a minute or so for me, but I know Bird loves it.
Now, how is the main staple of death matches fluorescent tubes, Bird? And then secondly, I feel the king of death matches was supposed to be Nick Gage. Who is the king of death matches? Where would you rank Necro Butcher, Nick Gage, or who else would you put in there, Bird?
I'll give him credit. He takes a serious beating. It's unbelievable that he's just 5 years older than me. I mean, not that I'm anything special, but he's 52 years old and he looks 75, every bit of. He beat cancer. His story is wild. His upbringing in childhood was jacked up. So you don't want to say you can see it coming, but you root him on somewhat. But I'm not sure he was going to go any higher than that. But on that level, he was I wouldn't say legend or anything of that name, but to that community, he would be in that realm in the same kind of boat.
But would you rate him above or below Nick Gage? And do you have any other boners for any deathmatch wrestler?
I would say Gage is way more of into his character. Got a stick on the mic, very intense. So he involves the crowd a little more than just Necro, just bleeding buckets and bashing his head on the concrete and things of that nature to get his pop. I think Gage is not sure his intelligence level though, but I think he gets his character and pushes more into that. Now there's a guy, Matt Tremont, the Bulldozer. I don't know if you guys have seen him before. I put him pretty high on that list of just guys that have been around. And he's really not an old guy, but it just seems he's 55 years old and he's 35. But that's kind of my stance on that.
And what do you know about Madman Pondo? Is he someone you were familiar with?
The funny thing was I met him last year in McMecken, West Virginia, about 2 hours north of here. Very nice guy in person. I had a good impression with him. I got a picture with him. I think he had either a pizza cutter or something. He was all bloody after a match, and it was what you'd expect. So I've seen him in person a few times, and Pondo's on that same. He don't do it quite as much as these guys his age, but Pondo's in that same kind of guys have been forever around the deathmatch scene that gets respect among that crowd.
I did think it was funny. They mentioned some of the other deathmatch staples or weapons. One of them was a mouse trap, and I'm pretty sure someone got a mouse trap to the wiener as they were describing that. His dad died in a fire. That seems pretty crazy. Does anybody know anyone that's, I don't know how many people I've known personally that died in a fire.
Yeah.
Is that a West Virginia staple bird? Or that seems pretty crazy.
Yeah, that seemed pretty out there. And back to Blaha, Pine Grove is about an hour from here, and there's literally nothing there. So pretty much what you would expect in Pine Grove, West Virginia. It's a good fact digging on that one.
Not to be confused with Pine Grove, West Virginia.
Hey, thumbs up. Good work.
So yeah, just kind of lots of interesting stuff there. Now, you said you didn't really watch Ring of Honor, Tom, but you kind of knew through Samoa Joe through message boards and stuff like that. One, some of the way they describe some of these message boards interactions with the Ring of Honor guys seem similar to maybe some other wrestling fans that exist nowadays. But how did you find out about Samoa Joe on message boards? When was it? Did you know about Ring of Honor?
I didn't really know much about Ring of Honor. I just knew Samoa Joe during TNA when I first heard about him. This match, though, I had no idea. They made it seem it was the coolest match that nobody's ever heard of or the underground's heard of, but I would have heard at least something about it, I would imagine, but I had no clue about this match. I don't know about you, Bird.
The match, I've never seen the match in whole until just recently, till the started
I
talking, so it wasn't
this was
well
on one of
produced.
your Faces of Death USBs.
And it was at the ECW arena, which that's my mecca of wrestling personally. I won't even go down that rabbit hole.
But did you hear about it at the time when it happened afterwards?
I don't remember hearing about it at the time, no. Now, going back to the dorky Ring of Honor message boards, guilty. Now, this was 2005. I would say about 06, 07 range till about 2010. I was pretty heavy in the ROH board. And I would be waiting. Here's pinching some pennies for you, real. They'd have every now and then, they'd have 40% off DVDs. Of course, I'm jumping on that and loading up and buying 10 of them. So that's why I'd wait for the sales, and I bought all that stuff. So I was a Ring of Honor guy. In person, the shows were really cool, but I didn't really know much about this show.
Now, I'm guessing, to me, it sounds like is it Cage Match or whatever those message boards are nowadays that everybody's on, but seems kind of a similar deal. Yeah. How big of a fan of Samoa Joe were you, or are you, Bird? And he just kind of seems a more durable iteration of Taz to me, but how would you describe him?
I think he's been the same guy for 25 years. I think he's very well respected. I think he's a real good wrestler. He's durable. He seems he loves the business. Doesn't get the respect, in my opinion, that I feel that he could or should. And I think they could have elevated him to higher levels in different promotions. That's just me, but I think he's carried himself well. And looks to me, he's aged, even though he's getting into his mid-40s. Same kind of style, and I think he's still got some life left.
How used has he been in AEW recently? I kind of lost track over what happened after the CM Punk stuff. I feel he lost the title. I guess CM Punk never lost the title, or he won the title and never, because he still has that title. But has he been super involved in the picture? We know we talked about Jarrett. Jarrett's faded out of the picture a little bit, but what about Joe?
Unfortunately, I wish he was back in the world title picture. I think even at that age, he's relevant. He's meaningful. He's got size. Here we go again. But there for a while, he was just in a bit group with you have Hook and a couple other guys, and just didn't seem they wanted to do much with that group. And he was their spokesman. You had Hobbs was with them at one time, just moving parts, and it just didn't seem that was great for Joe, even though he was the leader, but he could have been a lot higher.
I thought one of the more interesting things was him talking about doing Polynesian world tours as a kid with his family. I just thought that was an interesting detail. The other thing that's kind of interesting is it seems whatever promoters were working Necro, there's a lot of things Necro thought was going on that I really believe that Joe probably didn't know as much as what Necro thought he knew. Any thoughts on that, Tom? It seemed Necro really was, Joe wanted no part of this. And Joe's, I didn't even know what was going on. And then I think it was in the trailer, but there's the whole him going up to Philly to get laid, basically, and then walking into that death match.
Yeah, it seemed from his interviews that, you're right. It seemed he didn't know what was going on. He didn't know all the backstory or anything that, and it seemed like he didn't even know he was going to have a match with Necro when he arrived in Philly.
And I do believe that he, at least at minimum, didn't have any real beef with him, or
Right.
he cut that promo. He's just cutting what promo he's told to cut. It seems like he didn't
Yeah.
even know those kids from the Ring of Honor. I believe a lot of that stuff. I just don't know how. There's probably a lot of other things I don't know how much I believe. I believe that his hand was wet on the power slam because that looked brutal. But yeah, did you know anything about those wrestling students or the Shikara? It seemed you were kind of checked out for this part, Bird. You didn't have a lot of awareness of what was going on here.
So Chikara is one of those just real niche Philly promotions by a guy named Mike Quackenbush, who was actually very good in ring. Never got to see in person, but one of those promotions that I just wanted to say, hey, I was there and it seemed an enjoyable crowd. Now, what surprised me going into the document, I'm not sure if it was you guys or just me, they kind of presented it in the trailers that Necro and Joe hated each other and there's this blood feud. And come to it, they're fairly respectful for each other. Joe's, if he wants to get bashed, I'll respect his wishes. This is his kind of kingdom here in this kind of match. They were doing IWA Mid-South with Ian Rotten, who's just a different guy altogether, not well thought of in the business. But I thought Joe came across well, and there wasn't the hate that going in that I thought, not knowing really much of that storyline of that match.
Kind of makes sense when Joe said something about Rotten. He said something, oh, he's just saying whatever he wants to say, I guess, or something like that.
And we should mention that all three of us were at the ECW arena together for WrestleMania for the Hitchcock Memorial. This for our second time at Hitchcock. Holy cow. Might be my last.
Come on.
I was falling asleep. But
I would say the floors were a lot cleaner than that wrestling match.
I'm glad that we win. It's definitely seems several steps above what it used to be. But definitely glad to have got to experience that. What would you say what moves jumped out to you? I would say the power slam was one. And I think I'm not sure what it was, but it was almost like a T-bone suplex off the apron where the blood kind of stuck to the ground. Those look the two nasty spots to me. And also the fact, I assume his teeth were already up, but his teeth on some of that is Foley with the tooth through the nose kind of deal. What jumps out to you as the most shocking stuff you saw there, Tom?
As far as the match is concerned, the two bumps on the floor, the slip up on the power slam, landing on his head. I'm surprised that he was walking after that. Mm-hmm. And then the second spot, I guess, Joe tried to flip him or something like that, but didn't work at all. But going back to what Bird said about the presentation, I thought they presented it as not that they hated each other, more that this was the craziest match that nobody's ever heard of or something like that. But after watching all of that, I didn't watch the full match at all yet, but it didn't seem too crazy compared to nowadays. Then maybe it was.
I think to me, one of the craziest things I saw, and I feel it predated this match, but I remember the Kurt Angle Shane stuff. And I think a big part of that was Shane just not being a wrestler. But anytime you see someone's head go on concrete when he was trying to throw him through that King of the Ring glass, I just remember that being some of the craziest I ever saw. And once again, 70% real, unreal, right? But the whole just stuff with Kurt about Shane just keep telling him to do it again until he got him through there, and how pissed Vince was going to get. So I guess I could relate it to that. Once again, we've mentioned I'm more of a WWE guy, but for me, I remember that being pretty shocking, and it didn't seem it was gratuitous. It was, they were going for a spot, it got up, and they kept trying to do it. It was almost, I thought that was pretty cool. This was definitely gratuitous.
I think the Necro going through those fluorescent bulbs was more
for sure. To me, fluorescent tubes, just because the chemicals and everything else, I'm sure they have gimmick fluorescent tubes maybe that have different powder. But every time I see them, because I know how toxic that can be,
there's that one spot when it goes into its arm. What the hell?
Yeah, Bird, what spots jumped out to you? Have you seen the match since the show aired, and how would you rank it versus other death matches, or in the context that Tom's talking about of craziest things seen?
Yeah, I'm going to jump on what he said, just his head bashing on the concrete. And then when they replayed it, Joe got jacked up too. I wouldn't have thought that until he said that. Now, it just blows my mind even seeing some death matches over years and things, how these guys, it's a different world. They get up from this stuff. I'm just thinking to myself, if I did that I'd be done for. They're just up there, just the edge of the whole crowd gets them going. And he's taking just some hellacious shots. Now, death matches today probably a little more elements to them, and they just keep adding. And I'm just surprised nobody gets hurt majorly, even though when these guys get 50, 55 years old, they're 80-year-old men, if they make it there.
You see all the scars on their foreheads.
And we should mention one of Bird's favorite things is blood. If there's anything he loves more than men juicing, it's blood. So he's putting them all to their early graves with every half of red cent you pry from his cold dead hands. So the other thing I saw that I did think it was interesting, and I do believe this more or less, is Necro threw those first through forearms to set the tone. And I'm sure a lot of it, this is where I could say that they could have done a lot without interacting, is they're just escalating the violence. You do this, okay, then I do believe a degree of that. But I think Necro had such this picture of it in his mind of how he wanted to take all of this damage and have that one fire up. And even then, Joe responds maybe harder to the fire up than he thought. He was okay, if we're going to do this, now I'm going to do this. But yeah, I thought those were some of the more interesting things. Anything else on this match that you want to put a button on, Bird?
I will say these guys told a story well, and I think they both kind of went into that. Now we're going back 20 plus years. I think when you get small indie promotions, it was a big deal at that time, maybe even a little bit today when you got interacting with promotions. Oh, this guy over here with this fan base, even though a lot of it interacts. I thought that was a big deal probably for that Philly crowd. Oh, here we come. We're getting something to Samoa Joe's level, coming fighting our dude. What's this match going to look, number one? Thought Necro's smart enough to know how he wanted to play that game. Joe went with it, and I thought did well, came across well. And it's not three of us can just jump into a death match and make it look. I'm sure we could take beatings if we had to in that, but I think there's a little bit of elements to some good death matches. They're not all good.
Well, I'd say too, I remember as a kid or maybe even in my early 20s taking headshots before we knew, not wrestling headshots, but hitting my head on concrete or doing dumb, before we knew as much as we do now about head injuries. And so now you see it and it's even more cringy than it would be on a good day. Tom, any buttons you want to put on this wrestling blouse?
I thought one thing that was real surprising is how blind he was.
Yeah, I enjoyed that too.
Without his glasses, and I think I'm punching Joe.
Yeah, you gotta be careful out in the crowd, I would think, with that.
Yeah, right. No kidding, right? Yeah, and also with him bleeding all over the place, all over the arena floors, how is he not dead from some random disease?
Just being anywhere in Philly, how does anybody survive that city? I say. We talked a little about Joe kind of wraps up TNA, WWE, AEW. To me, and I guess it's just weird, the Joe WWE run seems a lot like the Taz run. How much of it was Vince and how much of it was he didn't really seem his body was really holding up at that time. But is that just a Vince excuse or was that really happening? But it seemed like at that time he was struggling to stay active. Obviously, it was a harder schedule than it is now. That probably would have been the hardest schedule he ever worked. I'm sure with indies and stuff, but with TNA or even AEW, I would think that stretch at that time, WWE was still doing enough house shows to be dangerous. And we get the cancer thing. The cancer thing didn't seem no fun, but it seems they built it up to be he got through all this so he could get through 4 rounds of chemo. Anything else on the life and times of Necro Butcher, Bird?
Just the weirdness of it all. I would like to have just a short documentary following him. What's this guy do on his daily life? What's his house? I'm expecting him to be a total mess of a house. Maybe I'm wrong. Just the whole interesting character he is that gets respect, but just a lot going on with that as well. So you're just a fireball just of emotions and life histories and beatings and cancers. This guy's still kicking somehow.
Tom, any closing on that from you?
I would say I wish they probably would have brought them two together to talk about the match. Yeah. That's the only thing that I wish would have happened.
Yeah, that could have been
at some point you see Necro commenting off of what Joe's opinions were. So you kind of got a little banter that, but that's the only thing. If they were together to talk about the match, that would have been great.
Now,
And
Necro's.
I thought we got a lot of Joe, which came across well, but I thought it was more the Necro story, kind of the TNA story. We got more Jarrett's story. I think that's what they wanted to present for the Dark Side crew. Not that you would typically think of Samoa Joe in a Dark Side episode, which that was kind of surprising a little bit to me for someone of his name and stature.
Well, they asked how many more of these episodes would you to see about specific matches. And I don't know from this format that I would want to see it. I'd rather see it as their Dark Side spinoffs that they do. Or I think there's some WWE matches where they could do, I'll throw some randoms out there. The Kamala Undertaker Survivor Series coffin match. I wouldn't mind seeing just some weird stuff. Some other ones would be, but I feel we've seen some of these already. I'm pretty sure we've seen stuff on the Boiler Room Brawl or the Piper Goldust match, but there's some, but just some off-color matches. I wouldn't mind seeing something out on the Punjabi prison match from WWE. I'd rather see that than the same thing we've seen, Hogan versus Andre for the 99th time. But I don't know in this format. I think the normal stories we get, there's only so many stories they can cover, although I think still think there's plenty out there. But are there any matches that jump out in your head, Bird? Besides Warrior Savage, WrestleMania 7, one of the greatest of all time?
I think all that kind of stuff, that level, we've seen great documentaries of, and it's been rehashed and rehashed. Now, probably Dark Side, what's their audience? How can they build their numbers? They probably can't anymore to what it is, and it's a heck of a series. We love it, but I'm not sure what their growth can be or what their ceiling can be. They're just pinching a little bit of straws on some of these topics, and some of them, how is this even an episode? And it turns out actually pretty well. So just a lot of it somewhat seems like it's thrown together, or maybe not the topic that they anticipated at first. Then you get just a lot of moving pieces, and I love all just the random cameos of people just to hear different opinions. But Blaha said just to have Necro and Joe together nowadays in the same room, that'd been pretty cool, I think.
Any matches jump out in your head, Tom?
Not really matches. I don't know how much they could get as far as showing what's on a Dark Side episode, but I would say it would be cool if they did a whole episode about the Attitude Era, just talking about how they come up with some of the they came up with, fucking May giving birth to a hand or something like that, or choppy PPP or whatever.
Yeah, I've tried to message them on there when they asked us before, but there was the WC promotion that was in Vegas where Sabu had matches and Cactus Jack right around the ECW days, and they had the casino match. And then Buffalo Jim, who ran the wrestling school out here, that the Godfather and Yokozuna was in till the end. And he was maybe murdered. And I think that would be a very interesting to cover. I think his death was covered on Unsolved Mysteries before. So I hope at some point they grab that one, because that was my only, I think it was more territory wrestling, but the closest I got to the indies as a kid. And actually
one of an episode on your organization.
Yeah, I've got plenty of footage of that crap show. Speaking of, what were you saying, grabbing little straws, Bird? Tom's got to get to that, but before that, next week is the Big Boss Man. Any thoughts or hopes for the Boss Man episode, Bird?
No, I think I haven't seen numbers, and ratings don't really bother me one way or another. Told you guys earlier, I can't imagine ratings were great on this episode. Maybe I'm wrong. I can see a little more interest with Boss Man, but again, how dark is it? It's going to be sad at the end. I think we kind of know that part, but hopefully it's not as dark and we get some stories that we don't know about him, because I think it's an interesting career and a heck of a talent. I just hope it doesn't go too dark, but I don't think it will, but I'm looking forward to that one.
Tom, Big Boss Man next week. You excited or what?
It'll be interesting. I actually don't really know his whole personal history, so it'll be interesting to see. But maybe we'll get a scene of, wasn't it him that drove the casket away from Big Show?
Yeah, I think he did that. He did the Peppy the dog dude.
Didn't he also get hung by the Undertaker or something like that?
Something like that, yeah. We all know the song, right? You know it word for word, right, Bird?
Yeah, it's one of those themes you just got stuck in your head. Yeah, it's a classic. And
Do
we
you
know
ever
where he's
take a
from,
trip down
where
to
he's
Cobb
from.
County, Georgia?
Need to put that on my list.
I'm not gonna sing it, but maybe
It'll
you
be
will do
on
it. Well,
the
you pay.
Wrestling
You got to
Teens
pay
Hour.
$4.99 for that on our only XM. All right, fellas, good talking with you this week, and we will be back next week with the Boss Man in episode 2 of 70% Real.
Awesome.
Now, you guys went to He-Man in theaters,
Yeah.
didn't you? And then did Whitney not go with you guys?
She went too, but she was just so pumped it was on Amazon as well.
To see it again.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah, I'll definitely watch it because I didn't get to see it in
so many
theaters.
mixed opinions, but we really liked it.
Yeah,
And
I think
something that far back, you're going to have some differences, and that's not going to be kosher with everybody. And I was a big He-Man guy, but I'm not negative on. There wasn't too many negatives in my opinion.
Yeah, one I think too is I don't know. It was with the Super Mario movie. What were people expecting? You know what I mean? Like it just. I think sometimes people's expectations are too high.
And I thought the guy that played it did well, but I was in my head, I wanted some just roided out, freaky He-Man. And this guy was more of a slender, just cut up dude. He wasn't your bulky Hercules 1985 WWF.
And we're calling it Barbie He-Man.
Yeah, what's up?
Bird wants some juice to the gills.
That's right, juice him up.